No, you heard the lady. We are recording this, so just getting that started here. Oh, and I'm getting some echo. I don't know why. So welcome, everybody. Is everybody hearing that echo, or is it just me?
Just you.
Just me? Okay, then I'll deal with it.
I'm hearing a little bit.
So,
Actually, when you back up, it seems like it's echoing.
oh, is this better?
Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, so I don't know why that was. Oh, you know what? Evelyn just closed her door. I have an idea that that was part of the problem.
It was Ellen's fault. Okay.
It is. It is. That's and she's
Evelyn.
not denying it, so we're going to go with that. So this has been quite a week, hasn't it?
Why do you say that?
Yeah. I mean that game on Saturday, if the infamous if, I think if Garbers had been playing, we would have won that game easily. I just think that with the amount of I guess one of the things that I guess I'm kind of blabbering here, but I was really I had to laugh at the end of the game when Arizona stormed the field. They barely beat a team that was essentially like the second and third string. They barely beat them. They were lucky to beat them, and they were thrilled. So I guess
Gary, to be fair, Gary, they had like a 20-game losing streak.
They had a 20-game losing streak, but again, it was sort of like beating up on on a junior college
You
team.
have a 20-game losing streak.
Gary,
You
they've
take what
got
you
a
could get.
20-game losing streak. They're absolutely horrible, and they beat us.
Right, barely.
What's that say about the Bears?
Well,
And all
it says that
20
they were-
people, all 20 people who were there stormed the field. You know what? No.
Right. Well, at any rate, so but we I don't know, it just kind of got weirder after that. So as I'm sure you all know, our game against USC has now been moved to December 4th.
Yay, we don't have to listen to their stupid band for several more weeks.
Yeah, there you go, Patty. Just that silver lining is
Silver
always
lining.
at the forefront for you, isn't it?
Yep.
Yeah, and that I have to admit that is pretty good. I was not looking forward to hearing that, same four poorly
Yep.
played notes. But at any rate, so for next week, I don't have a speaker lined up as of yet, but as I was kind of mentioning to some folks before we started the meeting, I'm trying to get somebody. I had a call into Berkeley Health Department and did not have a lot of luck there. They claim they have nothing to do with it. But I don't think I was getting to the right person. It was sort of an ordeal just to talk to a human. And I think it was somebody that was did public health in the kindergartens or something. I don't know. But at any rate, so I'm going to try to get somebody, related to that could maybe just give us some information on what's going on and the testing and the protocols and what's happened here and what needs to happen for us to actually resume playing again for next week. So, keep posted on, keep watching the emails and stuff. I'll keep everybody informed.
Okay, and maybe Jay would have a suggestion.
He might.
And okay, if he doesn't, that's fine.
No pressure.
Whatever.
No, I can give you a little insight. One of my roles is overseeing the football program along with Jim Knowlton. So I can personally give you a little insight tonight and maybe talk to Gary offline. I don't know if the public health authorities are interested in speaking to your group or not, but I could talk to Gary and maybe put you in contact with their people if you wanted. Someone with an MD after their name to answer some questions.
Okay, yeah, that'd be great. And because I am trying to find somebody that, I think one of the fears is that they'd be walking into an ambush, which this group just doesn't do that usually. But
we can.
I mean, yeah, we certainly are willing to make exceptions. But yeah, so that would be good if we could do that. And for our last game against UCLA, that is going to be, we have a speaker for that. That is going to be on Tuesday, 11/23. So note that it is on Tuesday because that is Thanksgiving week. And Wednesday of Thanksgiving week is just not a good time to get people to come to a meeting. So we've traditionally moved it to Tuesday. And that's going to be it's kind of actually now our traditional Tuesday of Thanksgiving week speakers. We will have one of our favorites, except for Jay, Dave Lambros, Pac-12 official Dave Lambros. So he'll be here. We can ask him why he thought Marcel Dancy's knee was down in the Colorado game, because he was the replay official for us in that game. So we can ask him about that. And if you've never been here for one of the meetings where Dave is here every year, it's always it's a lot of fun to have him here. So gives good information, and it's good to hear from the official. So be sure to register for that. And
Gary, that's not the last game anymore, by the way.
well, it is not the last game anymore, but given the efforts to get speakers, I have an idea it's going to be our last meeting of the year. So anyways, so with that, Adam is not here tonight, but Jay, I'm sure can, Adam Brooks usually gives us sort of the inside scoop of what's going on in the athletic department and with the football program. And I don't know if there's any news this week that you could talk about, but yeah, yes, Leslie.
Since we don't have Adam here, I just wanted to report in light of having Charmin be our speaker last week, Charmin Smith, the women's basketball coach. I went to the game last night, the women's game last night, and it was a very nice win over Sac State, 90-71. We had 3 players with 20 points each and a double-double for a player. And it was just overall a really, after all of what Charmin told us about the misery of last season, we now have as many wins as we had all last season. So we're 1-0. So just wanted to let everybody know it was great. Got to hear palms of victory. It was all nice, and we won't mention the men's game.
Yeah.
I was there for that. It was ugly. Go Charmin, go Bears.
Yeah, and if any of you that were not here last time for Charmin, it is up on the Sac Bears Cal Fans channel on YouTube, the meeting, and she was absolutely fantastic. And a couple of people mentioned after the meeting, I think Leanna, we were one of those that said it, that there was just not a single word of coach speak came out of her mouth. She was very candid. She was just absolutely fantastic. So if you didn't get a chance to be here for that, check out the video of it.
Hey, Gary,
really good.
this
Yes.
is Pat. I just want you to know that she spoke from the heart so well that I actually made, and maybe Jay needs to hear this, I actually made a very specific gift to women's basketball. She is working on what I call, the men's sports dominate. And she has done the best she could with what she's got. And I appreciated that. I appreciated her candor. And so I made a very specific gift to women's basketball at Cal.
Yeah, we appreciate that, Pat. Thank you so much. And I fully agree. Charmin is incredibly impressive. And she spoke at our head coach's retreat this summer and presented on how she's building the culture of her program, and got some insight from some Jack Clark and that, and just did a wonderful job. So I'm with you. She's very authentic, and I always enjoy hearing her perspective.
Yeah, she was just, I mean, I don't know what else to say. She was great. She was just fantastic. And yeah, she did. She spoke from the heart, very, very candid, and just really, we're lucky to have her. Lucky to have her. So the only thing I'm going to say before I go ahead and introduce Jay is that if anybody knows anybody that would like to be on the Sac Bears mailing list, I'm going to go ahead and put the email address for the club in chat here. feel free to give that to people and send it. Just anybody that would like to be on the email distribution list. We'd be glad to put them on. And and considering that these the virtual meetings are going to continue on for next year, that everybody is welcome. I mean, there's no certainly no geographical limitations. So go ahead and feel free to hand out that email to people. So with that, we're lucky. So yeah, Adam's not here, but Jay, I'm sure, is going to give us before he talks about name, image, and likeness, will give us some information. What's all the inside scoop going on in the athletic department and football, and kind of fill us in on where we're at with things right now. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce, I hope I get your title right. You're the Senior Associate Athletics Director of Administration. Did I get that correct?
Very good. Thank you.
That's quite a mouthful.
Yeah,
So,
I don't know what it means, but I appreciate that. Yeah.
So Jay, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to you.
Yeah, thanks, Gary, and thanks, guys, for having me tonight and for your support of the Cal Bears. Of course, happy to be here, and I've been at Cal 7 years. I got here 7 years ago, and I think I may have spoken with this group right after I got up here. I was hired as the head of the compliance office, and have slowly taken on some other duties and gotten promoted over the years. And so really over the last 3-4 years have helped Jim, like I said earlier, oversee the football program as the sport administrator, really serving as Jim's right-hand person for all things football. I also oversee the men's tennis and the women's water polo programs. We hired a new person to run the compliance office, so he reports to me. I'm involved in the admissions. I serve as our primary liaison to the both the undergrad and the graduate admissions offices, the grad division, and really over the last, I guess, 7 months have really been running point for the athletic department with some help from others, but running point on all things NIL, name, image, likeness. Not to be confused with NLI. Today was the first day of the NLI signing period, and I signed a lot of great recruits, including a couple of men's basketball, really strong, I think, men's basketball recruits today. So appreciate, again, the invite to talk about NIL specifically. But before, I guess, we get into that, and I will admit I don't have any prepared notes about the last 2 weeks, and so please don't tweet out what I'm saying here. But Jim Knowlton addressed the media last night, and Justin Wilcox just did an hour ago, along with a couple players. And what I can tell you, you might know some of this based on what you've read, I guess, or seen, but that isn't always accurate, of course. But we had a couple positive cases early last week, and so that triggered, I guess, a different framework from the public health officials, where the whole team had to be tested. And when that happened, there were a number of positive cases among the student athletes and the staff. So that was why we were obviously very short-handed. We made sure that anyone who got on the plane going to Tucson had a negative test as of Friday morning testing. And so we're really required to test twice a week for a couple weeks here is really what it comes down to. And we had enough players, obviously, to play the game, heavily underhanded, I guess, but shorthanded, but we were able to play the game Saturday. What happened through testing yesterday, there weren't very many positives yesterday, but they hit one particular position group. And this happened last year as well. When you fall short with the number of players, especially in certain position groups, it almost becomes a safety issue. It becomes impossible to field a team. So that's when we went into the mode of contacting SC and the Pac-12 to let them know that we wouldn't be able to play the game. We put that announcement out, and then through Jim Knowlton's work with the USC athletic director, they agreed to reschedule the game for December 4th. And we were able to do that, unfortunately, because both teams were out of contention to play in the Pac-12 championship game that will take place December 3rd. You guys obviously recall 3 years ago, we did the same thing with the big game due to fire and the air quality. We postponed that game to that first weekend of December. So that actually will work out, quite well, right? We already have some student athletes who tested positive last week who are back, and some more will come back later this week and early next week. And so we're very optimistic about the ability to maybe not have an entire team, but have a strong team going into the 124th big game a week from Saturday. And then, the ability to play UCLA and host USC to finish off the regular season. And as you guys know, we were picking up some steam here mid-season. And so we're excited about the opportunity to win 3 games and qualify for another bowl game. So that's, the couple minute version, I guess, the quick version of what's gone on the last couple of weeks. I'm happy to take a question or two, or what do you think, Gary? Or I can get into NIL and then take questions at the end. It's up to you guys.
Whichever you prefer. I just put it into chat. People can put questions in chat, which I usually do. Or, if you don't want to use chat, use the raise hand feature, at the bottom of the menu under reactions. Use the raise hand, because I can't see everybody on camera. So you may be raising your hand physically, and I might not be able to see it. But if anybody has any questions right now on what Jay's been talking about, we can go ahead and take those. If not, we'll get into the NIL.
Greg, you have one?
I do. I guess that I've never used that reaction thing. I guess it worked.
This once.
So 2 questions, Jay, and I get all of my questions are based on what I read both last night and today, which was all public information, and whether it was right or not, I don't know. Some of it was from Berkeley Department of Public Health, and some of it was from Jim's comments. The first question is, Berkeley said there were now a total of 44 positive COVID cases. And last week I had heard, and then I think Jim said that the 29 held out last week. It turns out they were all positive. So now Berkeley's saying it's up to 44. So that's sort of one question. And then the second question, and it's related to that, is I thought I read that Berkeley was saying there was a 10-day isolation period after somebody tested positive. And if that's the case, that wouldn't start clicking until after the positive or the time wouldn't start running until after the positive test.
Yeah, so I'll take the first one. The number that they referenced included student athletes and those affiliated with the program. So, some coaches, some staff, some support staff, people like that. So, there were probably a couple dozen student athletes who had tested positive, and a fairly significant number of staff as well. So that was the test last really Wednesday. And then when we tested again Friday, the numbers were really down. I think there might have only been 2 on Friday and then 3 positive tests yesterday. So the hope is that continues to dwindle, down to 0, obviously. And then the second part, per CDC guidance, I know a little more than I ever cared to know, I guess, but per CDC guidance, there is a 10-day isolation period, and it really it starts with either the date you test positive or the date of the onset of symptoms. And so it's not as clear cut, just anyone who tested positive yesterday automatically has 10 days. It's contingent on when their symptoms began. So anyone testing positive would have an interview with the public health office, and then they set a return, kind of a return to society type date. And then so when that happens, the student athletes would take a medical exam and go through some tests. And if they are feeling okay, I think by then the next day they're able to return to action.
So that's why the hope is that I heard Jim say this also, he's pretty confident that we'll have and you said it too, most of the team back for big game. That's why he's confident as we get into next week that things should be looking pretty good.
Yeah, exactly. Some people who tested positive last week are already back on the practice field, and they'll just continue to get cleared over the next few days. And so, yeah, we'll knock on wood here, because we'll continue to test, but the hope would be that it spiked and it'll continue to go down and won't spike again. And we'll have a significant amount of our team ready to play in the big game.
Hey,
Thank
Jay,
you.
how difficult is that in terms of prepping for a game? Because you've got part of the squad going through practice and the other part of the squad has to be isolated.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been tough this week, Steve, is the reality. It's hard to prepare for a game without a full team. And as you guys can appreciate, I think, like it's hard if you get cleared on a Friday, probably to play a football game on a Saturday, especially at certain positions. So, we didn't plan for 3 people to test positive yesterday in one position group, but it happened. And so we're a little fortunate in a sense, I guess, that game got postponed to December 4th, because it would have been probably tough.
What's the mood of the team after all this turmoil? Are they hanging together? Are they supporting the program and still working hard?
Yeah, it's a great group. I'm lucky to be around these guys and the coaches and Coach Wilcox daily, and it's a great group. Even when we're going through some troubles on the field, right, and lost some close ones, and they've never wavered, right? I mean, we lost that tough game at Oregon. Obviously had our chances on the road, and I think a lot of teams would have fallen apart at that point. And I'm with these guys in their post-game press conferences and give them a little pat on the back and say, hang in there. And I had full confidence they were going to. And so so this last week or 10 days has been no different. They're a tough group, a resilient group, and had a nice practice today, according to Justin. And I think they follow the lead of their coach, who is a high character guy, obviously, and sets the right tone, has the right tone from the top.
Okay.
I have a question. I don't know how to do my little button, so this is Pat.
That's fine.
What I don't understand is, with all this vaccination, and maybe somebody answered this already, with all the vaccination, all the testing, high-level stuff that Cal has followed, how do we end up getting all these positive tests?
Yeah, it's I think the right question, Pat, and I don't think we have the answer to that. I think that's something the public health office is looking into. But you're right. I'm sure you guys have read it, but the program is 99% vaccinated. So we take a lot of pride in that. So, we're probably surprised to have that spike in cases.
And I think the other thing that's worrisome is that it ends up being probably, but I don't know for sure because we don't have its personal data. They end up being testing positive, but probably being asymptomatic carriers, that they're not getting sick, but they still test positive.
Yeah, that's the part I'm gonna, due to privacy laws, of course, I'm not gonna comment individually or even, I guess, collectively, but I think that's, fair to say. These are breakthrough cases, and probably safe to say many of them were asymptomatic.
Yeah. Okay. I don't want to drive that. I realize it's beyond necessarily everything that you can report on it. I keep saying, why do they keep testing positive when we've been so proactive?
Yeah, and it really came down to this campus, as you guys all appreciate. We follow the recommendations from the public health officials, and anytime there's within a cohort of people, whether it's a dorm or a fraternity or a lab or a classroom, if it triggers a certain number, then everyone in that cohort ends up getting tested. So that's really what ended up happening within our cohort, the Cal football program. So, Gary, I can move on to NIL.
Actually, I think Rob has a question. Just one more quick
okay.
question. Yeah.
Sure.
I think, thanks, Gary. So I'll capture collectively and hopefully politely comments from a lot of, I think you've seen a lot of this on Twitter and elsewhere, but why is the university even being subject to any of the city of Berkeley's rules? I mean, I think that's a consistent theme we've seen and a lot of frustration from the fan base is why does the city even have a role here at all with the university being a part of the state of California?
Yeah, Rob, I heard that comment for the first time yesterday, and I guess I'll leave the answer to that to people well above my pay grade. I don't have the answer, but I can tell you since the onset of the pandemic, we've our UHS, University Health Services Department, and head medical team on campus has worked hand in hand with the City of Berkeley Public Health Office and done everything we could to implement their guidance, including this last 10 days.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah.
All right.
So with that, name, image, likeness. So what I thought is obviously a hot topic in college athletics, and I again appreciate the invite to discuss this, Gary. This is part of what I want to start doing is a little more outreach so people understand, the Cal supporters understand what this means and how you can get involved if you would like to do that, or any organization you're affiliated with if they'd like to get involved with Cal student athletes in the NIL world. So I'll just format this. I'll talk about what is NIL. I'll talk about the second part, how we're implementing it at Cal with our Golden program, and give you a little insight into some of the NIL activities among our student athlete population. And then the third part, again, help if you want to get involved. I'll give you maybe a couple options, some things to think about. So I'm sure, again, you guys are well informed, but you certainly heard about NIL. But just to start, going back a couple of years ago in 2019, State Senator Nancy Skinner, based out of Berkeley, proposed a bill in the state of California legislature that would allow student athletes in the state of California to earn compensation, not from Cal, not from the university, but from outside sources for use of their name, image, likeness. It was a concept that I and we as an athletic department embraced. We really felt that as college athletics evolves, that student athletes should have the same rights as the general student body in this area. And we have people on campus that are social media influencers and profiting because they have hundreds of thousands of followers on their social media accounts. And there's really no reason student athletes shouldn't have that same right. What we advocated from the start and continue to advocate for is a national standard. As you guys can appreciate, college athletics is a competitive business and competitive industry, and all you really want is a level playing field with your competitors. And so we were nervous initially that if the state of California passed this bill and others didn't, would that make California student athletes ineligible and just create some inequities. And so ultimately the bill was adopted by the state legislature, signed by Governor Newsom, and was set to go into effect in 2023. But a number of states then across the country followed suit and passed their own NIL bill, and many of them were set to go into effect July 1st of 2021. So leading up to July 1st of this year, the word was the NCAA had created some working groups and was going to pass its own package of legislation. And ultimately, I believe it was June 30th, the NCAA adopted a new rule policy where student athletes all across the country could profit from use of their NIL. And how it works is if you're in a state with an NIL law, you have to follow that state law. And if you're in a state that doesn't have an NIL law, you have to follow whatever institutional policies you create surrounding NIL. So there's some inequities around the country, and I think that needs to get cleaned up. Probably at the federal level, I think that's the only way it can really get cleaned up. And so that's something that we've talked to our government relations people and are advocating for. Unfortunately, I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So yeah, as of July 1st of this year, student athletes all across the country can profit from their use of their name, image, likeness. A couple things that entails: they can promote a company for the first time. They can get paid to promote a business, a product, a service, whether it's a billboard, a TV ad, a radio ad, a social media post, things like that are all allowed. They can get paid to sign autographs or make a celebrity appearance. So someone could hire a student athlete to show up at a birthday party and sign autographs. And there's a Cameo app some of you might have, where celebrities, you can pay to have a celebrity sing happy birthday to your niece or nephew, things like that. So our student athletes are now able to do those types of things, get paid based on their name, image, likeness. They can run their own camps. In the past, Chase Garbers could work someone else's football camp, but now he can run create the Chase Garbers quarterback academy if he so chooses, and profit from his name in that sense. T-shirts and jersey sales. So Chase, there's a company called the Players Trunk that Chase entered into a deal with, where now you can go to that website and buy a Chase Garbers number 7 Cal jersey with his name on the back, and he gets a cut of all those T-shirt sales. So and then the last thing, where we're seeing the evolution of this is you see some schools, and we may be following suit, really enter into some group licensing partnerships, or companies that work to bring student athletes together and then as a package sell their rights. So I think what you're going to see over time is like player trading cards, baseball cards for all sports, appearances by teams going out to a business together. The old video game, the EA Sports NCAA football video game, that's been on a hiatus for many years now. I could see that coming back under a group licensing context, where student athletes across the country pool together and give their rights to EA Sports or whatever the video game company might be, and then they collectively would get a cut of those sales. So those are some of the types of things that we're seeing and expect to see down the road. Under the California law, it's a very broad law. There aren't too many restrictions. So it basically says student athletes in the state of California can earn NIL compensation. It cannot be from your own institution. It has to come from an outside source. Any student athlete in the state of California cannot enter into a deal that conflicts with our athletic department deals. So the easy example there is, we're at this point an Under Armour institution, and a student athlete could enter into a deal with Nike, but they couldn't wear Nikes during while they're on Cal time, so to speak. During the practice, during a competition, in a post-game press conference, they couldn't be wearing a Nike t-shirt, but when they go home after the game, at that point, they could obviously wear their Nikes, and they could promote, put out a social media post promoting Nike. That would be allowed under the California law. They're trying to keep it, both the NCAA and the states are trying to keep this out of the recruiting process. And so we can't promise an NIL deal to a recruit. And then the student athletes are required to report all their NIL activities to us as an athletic department. So again, very few restrictions, very broad. And the other thing is, student athletes could, if they so chose, they could enter into a deal with an agent. You could not have an agent to pursue a professional sports career, but you could sign with an agent to help you with NIL activities, with sponsorship type activities. So that's what the law is and what NIL is. At Cal, we put together a campus working group starting this spring. We met really every week leading up to July 1st. And you may have seen a press release, I can maybe put in the chat, but created what we call the Golden Program. And we as an institution can't serve as an agent for our student athletes and find them NIL deals and negotiate on their behalf, things like that. That is not something we're able to do, nor necessarily want to do. That really goes beyond our mission as educators at this great institution. But we can educate. And so that's the biggest thing with our Golden Program. We wanted to give our student athletes some, especially those that aren't in the Haas School of Business, give them business education on brand building and contracts and negotiating and financial management, financial literacy, things like that. So we entered into a partnership with the Haas School of Business, and they created a course, a 2-credit course that was open for 50 students in the spring on personal brand building and really equity fluent leadership, because a key part of what we wanted to do is make NIL a values-based thing. We thought that differentiates us from other schools where student athletes were empowering them, challenging them to look inward and define who they are, what their values are. And then when they enter the NIL space, they're entering into deals that with companies that align with their personal values. So we did a fall speaker series. We've had 3 speakers come in, and a 4th one next week on financial literacy, contracts, brand building, social media, building a following. So we're trying to do our part to create a world-class educational component around NIL. Second thing we did was partner with a company, Influencer, which is one of the nation's leading brand building platforms. It's an app that all student athletes get on their phones, and what we do is upload every picture we take from a preseason photo shoot or in-game videos and things like that our creative team create. We give student athletes access to all that, and they can upload that onto their Instagram site or their Twitter account to help them build their personal brand. That platform also allows student athletes to get access to Cameo and some of these NIL social media companies where they can enter the NIL marketplace. There's one that allows student athletes to create instructional videos. So you could create a 20-minute video on how to shoot a basketball and put that on the market to be sold, things like that. And then that gives them access to really a personal brand building consultant through this Influencer company to help student athletes build their brands and get analytics on their Twitter accounts and who's following them and who are they following and what hashtags to use and how to build your following on social media, because obviously the more followers you have, the more you're able to monetize that. So last thing, we're trying to do things like this now and really promote this to our alumni network and the Bay Area and Berkeley communities. And, we, again, can't serve as an agent, but want to try to get the word out to try to facilitate, some activity, I guess, among our student athlete population, because where this is going in recruiting, you guys can all appreciate recruiting such a competitive landscape that I think although we can't promise a recruit an NIL deal, I think we want to be able to demonstrate to certainly high-level recruits that when you come to Cal and UC Berkeley, you can have a great athletic experience, academic experience, but you're also able to make a little money through use of your NIL. So that's some things that we're doing on campus. And then I'll just say, over the first about 100 days of NIL, we had about 130 student athletes enter into deals. Some positive news, like over 50%, I think 54% of those deals were with female student athletes. So it's not just going to football and men's basketball players. Those deals range anywhere from getting free gear to promote a startup apparel company to, we've seen some 4-figure deals, I guess, $5,000 type deals to promote some companies, student athletes promoting some camps. Chase, I'm not violating his privacy. It's on his Twitter account. You can see I think promoted some companies. FTX, our new field sponsor, also entered into a separate deal with Chase for him to sponsor the crypto exchange. See some student athletes sponsoring, again, apparel companies, equipment companies, coffee, mocha, cup things like that, energy drinks. And so it's good to see our student athletes getting active early in the NIL space. We have one student athlete who's had 7 or 8 deals, another student athlete with 200,000 followers on Instagram. She's trying to become a model and is, I think, well on her way to being successful there. So I she'll certainly be able to monetize her Instagram account if she so chooses. And then I think I'll just conclude here and open it for questions. But how can you get involved? So if any of you again are affiliated with a company and organization that wanted a student athlete to partner with a student athlete, you could reach out directly to those student athletes. That's now allowed. It's hard for me to say as a former compliance director, but that's certainly allowed for you to reach out directly on social media or otherwise and send a direct message and see if they're interested. If you're having trouble finding a particular student athlete, you could come to me and I could facilitate a conversation. People that maybe wanted to give to Cal Athletics to help us build out this golden program, our NIL program. It costs some money to enter into these partnerships and create this business education for our student athletes. We've talked to Jim Knowlton about, you see some schools adding a position. This is one part of my job. There are places around the country that have hired someone to spend 100% of their time on NIL. And I think we may be going that direction at some point. And then I think someone put in the chat, I think you saw Phil Knight at Oregon set up a company. Washington established a company that basically solely exists to help student athletes at those schools enter into NIL deals. And so we haven't had anyone step forward to do that at Cal. And if you wanted to be the first, I'm certainly not going to stop you. And obviously we all know how great Cal student athletes are as far as ambassadors for this institution. And I think, they're very marketable as far as representing, being strong representatives for organizations. So we want to encourage people to get into that space. So with that, Gary, I can pause here and catch my breath and take any questions the group has.
Yeah, and one of the benefits of hosting these meetings is even though there's some questions in chat, I get to go first. So I actually just have a couple of questions, and we'll throw it open to the ones in chat and for anybody else that has questions. One of the things that you mentioned was this, I think it was called Players Trunk, that Chase Garbers has, Chase Garbers Cal jerseys. So that kind of made me think, does Cal also have to license, and is this going to be a way for Cal actually to the athletic department to increase their revenues? Or when these student athletes maybe want to wear Cal gear or use the Cal logo or anything like that, where they would have to pay licensing fees to the university. And then my second question, which is kind of different, is you mentioned that there are reporting requirements for the students. What are the penalties if they don't report?
Yeah, the second question, I'll go first. They haven't really defined what. It's just the state law that says you have to report. And so we've had 130, and I think there are more out there that they haven't reported. I think what a student athlete, it's in their own interest to report, because we check to make sure it's all kosher with NCAA rules and make sure they didn't inadvertently enter into a contract that conflicted with one of our team deals or our university deals. And then getting to, I guess, your first question, the licensing, the use of the Cal script, the trademark logos, things like that is something we've had a lot of discussions about. Ultimately, the athletic department has a contract with a company, CLC, I think Collegiate Licensing Company, And so we basically give our rights to them, and they enter into deals with t-shirt companies and things like that. So I think the things, you know, you see in the bookstore and at different stores, those businesses really work with CLC to get access to the Cal logo. So the player's trunk, in my Chase example, Chase enters into a deal with the company, the player's trunk. That company has a deal with CLC to get access to our Cal logos. And so we get I think a flat rate from CLC every year. And then anything above, we have, I think there's a revenue split at some point. So yes, it all helps. Every t-shirt sold helps meet that mark that is set. And then any t-shirt sold above that, we certainly profit from. So that's something that, as you guys, again, can appreciate, that the university doesn't just hand out its logo to any business. And so there's a process through the brand management, brand protection office on campus. If it goes beyond licensing, if Chase had wanted to enter into a deal with Wells Fargo and they wanted to put him in an ad wearing a Cal jersey, things like that, under the, say their gate, things like that, they would have to, of course, get permission from campus, just like any business, of course, would have to get permission from campus to use those marks.
Okay, we've got a few questions in chat, and Steve has his hand up too. Wendy, you asked a question early on. Wendy, do you want to ask your question? Okay.
Sorry, I couldn't unmute myself.
Okay.
Yeah, I was just wondering what the NCAA's role is in all this. Will they oversee governance on the whole NIL issue?
Yeah, they spent a year after the state of California passed its law. The NCAA created a working group, spent a year creating this robust package of NIL rules. And what happened also in late June, there was a Supreme Court decision, the Alston case, which, how would I put it? It essentially called into question the NCAA rules on compensation. And so after that case, the NCAA, I think, didn't have a great interest in regulating this space. So the NCAA then, going into July 1st, basically said, again, it's up to the individual schools and states. So it's a little bit of the wild, wild west right now. We would prefer a national standard, but it doesn't appear the NCAA will be able to create that standard. And so now our efforts are in advocating really the federal government, Congress. And Jim Knowlton was in DC last month and had meetings with different representatives along with other athletic directors around the Pac-12 in an effort to try to spark some interest for them to create a national standard. Probably rightly so. They have a few other things on their mind, right, as a federal Congress, and so NIL is not at the top of the list. So I think we're going to be in this wild, wild west state for a while.
Then I think Steve, and then I think Rick has a question too. So Steve,
actually, my question is a follow-up to Rick's question, and it's a slightly different, but he can get to his next, I guess. But Rick brings up the point of the question of Phil Knight. And Money Bags up in Oregon. And there are several schools that have huge donor bases, including the University of Serial Cheaters in Los Angeles and others. And so my question deals with, how in the world can Cal and our donor base compete against some of these schools? And you have a situation in NCAA football right now where the rich keep on getting richer, and the same teams show up in the in the playoffs and in the championship series. It just seems like the discrepancy between the haves and the have-nots, given the NIL, is going to widen.
Yeah, I think those are legit concerns, Steve. I think that some of those inequities could get exacerbated in this new environment. One of the questions is there a limit on how much a student athlete can make? And the answer to that is no. And I think under the NCAA standard, there's always this fair market value piece, I guess, but that's a pretty nebulous term, right? Fair market value is really what someone is willing to pay in a sense, unless it shocks the conscience. So yeah, I think it's something we're certainly monitoring, and Cal's never had a fill night. I think at this point, some of those places where big time donors like that have stepped up and created these entities, that hasn't probably taken hold nationally at this point. Those schools are few and far between, but I think there's a concern that that becomes the norm, and then that could make it more difficult to recruit if we're not able to find a way. Because again, although we are not able to promise to recruit an NIL deal, there would be nothing that would prohibit us from telling a recruit what kind of deals our current players are getting. And so I think if you have a big time donor creating NIL deals out of thin air for their student athletes, then that becomes a strong selling point in the recruiting process. So it's not an amazing answer, but it's something, yeah, we're certainly well aware and concerned about.
Am I wrong, or did I read a while ago that some football player, maybe Alabama or somewhere southeast, was getting like $1 million?
Yeah, Nick Saban had that comment in a press conference that the quarterback had $1 million in NIL deals. I don't know if that's accurate or not. It probably didn't hurt in recruiting to make that statement.
I don't think so. Yeah, I don't think it would. I mean, why would he want to come to Cal, right?
Yeah, and we've always, as you guys know, we're selling. I don't want to. I know the Washington football coach got in a little trouble last week for comments, I guess, in recruiting versus Oregon, but about the academic prowess, right, of certain schools over others. And I think at Cal, again, this group will appreciate. We've always sold. This is a 40-year experience, not a 4-year experience. And so you sign with a school, the #1 public school in the world. Not only can you play at the highest level of athletics, but get the best education in the country, and that's going to set you up for life. So, I think that message will continue. And we've always talked, we got the gift from Brian Cameron to create the Cameron Institute to really do career development and position student athletes to get what we call golden opportunities, to get a great first job, because that's going to lead to an amazing career. And so now this has challenged us to think about, instead of preparing student athletes to get a golden opportunity after they graduate, but to try to position them to get a few golden opportunities while they're at Cal as a student.
Thanks.
Yeah. I think you answered Rick's question about the limits on NIL earnings already. So Paul, you had a question.
Yeah. As NIL grows over time, we're going to see, I'm sure, vast discrepancies between the income of star players versus non-star players. My question is, how big is the danger or concern that will lead to dissension or jealousies and harm team spirit?
Yeah, it's a good question, Paul. I mean, and it was one of the probably arguments that some had against the passage of an NIL bill that would create some issues among the team. I think, pro teams have probably dealt with this forever, right? LeBron is making a lot more money in endorsements than the 12th man on the Lakers.
Mm-hmm.
I think the early signs, I would say, in talking to our coaches, this is a concern. It might not have been a big enough concern to stop the bill from being adopted, because I still go back to that principle of student athletes should probably have the same rights as a general student body in this area. But I think it's something that is on our mind. I think you've seen some good stories, like a quarterback will get an NIL deal and share it with their offensive line, some things like that. I think it in some cases maybe can help bring a team together. But yeah, something we're monitoring. And the other thing, as I keep saying, but you guys can appreciate how difficult it is to be a student at Cal, let alone a student athlete. And so we don't want student athletes thinking only about NIL, right? We want them focused on what's most important, their education, and second most important probably is their ability to succeed on the playing fields. And so I think that, that time management piece is something that is probably as concerning as dissension among the team if someone is getting better deals than someone else.
Okay.
Yep, Patty has a question.
You want me to read it?
Sure.
Okay,
Yeah.
so if Chase wants to do something with Wells or B of A or whomever, but Cal's bank is PNB or whatever those letters are, Bank of the West. How does that would seem to be a conflict beyond what sneakers you wear on or off the field. So how does that get resolved?
Yeah, and so, some of this, Patty, is we're figuring it out as we go, and that the specific question hasn't come up yet, but I think it will at some point. I think if you just read the California law, yes,
please.
What's that?
I said, oh, please.
Yeah,
come on.
Yeah, but the technical answer, I guess, would be that as long as Chase isn't promoting Wells Fargo in your example, during his post-game press conference, right, on Cal time, it would certainly be okay for him to enter into a sponsorship deal with Wells Fargo. I think because Cal as an institution partners with, I think it is Bank of the West, I can't imagine the university lending its logo to Chase for that deal. So Chase would appear in a Wells Fargo ad wearing a navy blue t-shirt, but not a Cal t-shirt, I think is how it would play out.
Oh man, I do not want that policing job. Thank you very much. What a nightmare. What a nightmare.
So yeah, I hear you.
Okay, Rick has a couple of questions.
Dave, what are your thoughts on there being a separation of schools based on the few that can afford to pay huge NIL deals because of their boosters and the rest? I mean, how might this lead to really a so-called professional division of schools that can pay that and everybody else? I appreciate your comments about Cal student athletes are coming because they want a well-rounded education and college experience. But obviously there are others around the country that could care less about that. They're all in it for the money. Where do we see this going?
Yeah, I mean, this is, the whole state of college athletics is in flux right now, right? There's an NCAA constitutional convention that is happening soon, and there'll be a big vote in January on the future of the NCAA, and you continue to see, I think, Division I splitting from Division II, Division III, and then the Power Five maybe kind of splitting from the other 300 or so Division I schools. And then, to your point, even within the Power Five, then the 65 Power Five schools, you have some that have some different philosophies than others. And, so I think part of that we saw out of the Pac-12 aligning the alliance, right, aligning with the Big Ten and the ACC is a group of 41 schools that are committed to the academic side in addition to the athletic side. And so at these high level conversations on the future of the NCAA and how this is structured, I think it's going to be really interesting to see how it plays out, to say the least. Again, until the federal government steps in, I think there's going to be some inequities. I think you're going to see some student athletes choose schools based on how much NIL compensation they can receive and not based on the value of that education or even their athletic program. And so it's a concern. It really is. And at minimum, you could argue there's always been some inequities in college sports. And again, I think this exacerbates it. And so I think if we at least have a federal standard where everyone's on the same playing field. And one example I'll give is, like, in some states, the school is not prohibited from facilitating deals for their student athletes. So you could hire someone on the athletic staff to be an agent to go find NIL deals. And so then in that case, it's not even necessarily the donors, it's the school himself. And you could make an argument that that's pay for play. You're finding deals to pay your players. And so I think we want to see a national standard. I would prefer to see one that would at least prohibit that there can be no institutional involvement. But ultimately, that's probably as far as you can go. I don't think there's going to be a salary cap. And so those schools where donors are going to give cars to student athletes to make an autograph appearance at the dealership, that's already happening, and it's going to continue to happen. And that may not be best for college sports, but it's the way this has gone.
Do you see, because even within the Power Five, well, even the 44 schools of the Pac-12, the Big Ten, and the ACC, there's a huge difference between an Oregon and a Cal, between an Ohio State and a Northwestern, as far as sort of being this super conference or whatever of these schools that can pay that, and they buy the best players and do whatever they do, and then everybody else is sort of more of not an Ivy League model necessarily, stepped up from that, but a step down from where these other schools have placed themselves.
Yeah, I mean, ultimately, I don't think all 65 Power 5 schools are going to go the direction you're referring to. There'll probably be some for sure, but those schools have to have someone to play. So I don't think they'll split away completely. But again, I think there've always been some inequities. There were prior to NIL, and there will be after, and that's just almost, it is what it is. I think as at Cal, since we don't have Phil Knight stepping in to create a company, we've been in conversations with some companies that would, for example, there's a company out there that would allow donors to basically donate to this company, and that entity would facilitate NIL deals or even create NIL deals. So the University of Florida signed with this company. So if you had a group of people that wanted to support women's basketball, they could give to this company, and then that company would create some autograph signings and celebrity appearances and things like that within the rules. So it wouldn't be Cal Athletics doing it. It would be this entity. So I think you're going to see some more of that, and Cal may not need Phil Knight to be successful, but we need to be in the game in some respect, for sure.
Sure. And I agree that these other super whatever teams are going to need someone else to play. But I'm also, the question in my mind is, we play FCS schools, which sometimes get referred to as body bag games. Do some of the Power 5, lesser Power 5 teams become body bag games for the Oregons and the Ohio States and the Clemsons and Alabamas or whatnot?
Yeah, I would look at it this way, Rick. I mean, we have nice facilities. They're in some respects not amazing, right? We don't have the lazy river around the football complex like you see in some places, but we have really nice facilities. And so I think we're, in that context, we're in the game, right? We may not have all the bells and whistles, but we have enough to recruit, while we're also recruiting to our core selling point, which is this combination of big time athletic and academic experience. So yeah, we have to get involved in NIL like we have, in a sense, with facilities. We need to have nice enough facilities to be able to recruit some players, knowing that we're never going to have the opulent facilities that others have.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm not suggesting that we should. I'm just sort of in my mind thinking there's going to be those few schools that can afford to pay whatever the heck they want to pay. And then there's going to be everybody else.
Yeah, it's on our mind for sure. Yep.
So Jay, are there any other questions? I have, I'll ask you a last question here. You know, we used to actually get these little pamphlets years ago, and in compliance, you'll know what I'm talking about here, with all the, okay, you guys are boosters, you're supporters, and when you're, you know, stay away from the recruits, don't talk to them, you're going to get us on probation, all this going on. And it just seems to me that this with this NIL, that you know, it's going to kind of blur those lines. I mean, it used to be very, very firm. You know, just it kind of one of those things is, if you're asking the question, is it okay if I talk to somebody about this? You have to ask the question. The answer is no. And it seems that this is just going to kind of blur the lines that, you know, well, can the Phil Knights then go to a recruit and say, hey, you should come to Oregon because I'll give you this great deal and you'll make all this money as a player? How do we kind of reconcile that, or how's that going to play out? Or is it just going to, you know, is it, you know, yet to be seen?
Yeah, it's a little to be seen, and it's a completely different framework. You're right, Gary. I mean, I think the two rules the NCAA kept in place as of July 1st in this realm are, there can be no pay for play. So the schools can't, beyond the full athletic scholarship, schools can't promise anything or provide anything above that. And then the second rule that they kept in place is there can be no NIL deals for recruits. We can't promise an NIL deal for any of our recruits. And so if, in your example, if Phil Knight were to arrange a deal for an Oregon recruit, that would still be a significant NCAA violation that, you know, hopefully would result in significant sanctions for them. And so that still is prohibited. You all, as boosters, as donors, still are not able to have really any communication with recruits. That rule has remained in effect. Where it's really changed, though, is once they enroll at Cal, you know, and prior to July 1st, if a student athlete called you and said, I'm behind on my rent, can you get me $500? The answer was absolutely no. And technically, if a student athlete reached out to you and said, I want to sponsor your company, can you give me $500? You could enter into a legitimate business deal to do that. And so it's just something, again, it goes against 16 years of training that I've had, right? Just to say no to those things, but it's allowed. And at the end of the day, this is all in the best interest of the student athletes. So you guys have raised some great concerns, and I share them, but I always go back to, I think at the end of the day, we want to look out for what's best for student athletes, and it's hard to argue that NIL is not good for the student athlete.
I got a couple more questions. Steve, did you have another question, or your hand's just still up from the last one?
My hand is still stuck up, but I do have another question, and just to follow up to what
So
Jay
yes on
just said.
both.
Yeah, what Jay just said. Do you have a sense, or can you say this publicly? Do you have a sense that the NCAA is concerned about this dichotomy between the haves and the have-nots that we've been talking about tonight? Or do you think the NCAA, you know, might like the idea of having 8 or 10 super powerful teams because it draws more public interest and more TV revenue and things like that?
Yeah, and here's how I would respond, I guess. I mean, the NCAA is the schools, right? There's a national office in Indianapolis, but the votes ultimately come from the schools. So I think there's been a lot of conversations in recent years on just the structure of the NCAA as a whole. You guys are probably aware, I think something like 90% of the NCAA revenue comes from March Madness, from the men's basketball tournament. And a lot of that revenue goes to support all 350 Division I schools and the 35 or so conferences. It goes to support Division II, it goes to support Division III. And so there's a lot of conversations to say, is that right? Should that money, should that be consolidated? That whatever it is, $700-800 million a year, should that stay within Division I first? And some would say that if you just did a tournament with the Power Five, the 65 Power Five schools, that would be as lucrative as the one with 68 teams and representing all 350 Division I schools. So I think there's just a lot of conversations at high levels among the NCAA membership on, should the Power Five break away? Should FBS football, the 120 football schools, break away? Should the money stay at the top? And I think those are the types of conversations that are happening, and there's going to be some answers to that over the next year, I would say.
And Matt, did you have a question too, or just because your comment is really good?
Hello?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was my comment is that at some point, there's only a certain number of these extremely high profile things. So, so at some point it's self-limiting, because you can't, if you're starting at USC, but then, they have a bunch of people say that you're going to be behind, then maybe that's not such a good thing, because you're not going to get 4 years of high visibility than if you can prove yourself and build your brand as a starter elsewhere. So to some degree, I think that will close the gap. The question, I think, is just how much that would do to counteract the big spenders, and how much revenue sharing might do that.
Yeah, I think it's a great point. You're right. I mean, would you rather be fourth string at Alabama or a starter somewhere else? I think that's something that comes up. Alabama, it seems like no matter who they put in the game, is a high school All-American, even if they get to the third, fourth string. And so, again, you've seen some of that stockpiling of talent, I think, in football and basketball. And it'll be interesting to see if that, again, gets exacerbated due to NIL. Someone asked about, is it exclusive to college athletics? I think it's allowed for high school players, but it really depends on the high school association. So I think you see some student athletes going to some prep schools that aren't regulated by the National Federation of High Schools, where NIL is allowed. But I believe the National Federation of High Schools came out against NIL, that they would retain their rules which prohibited NIL activities. So I guess it probably depends on what umbrella the high school is under. Lester.
Hey, I just saw an article in the computer about the colleges that have produced the most billionaires, and Cal was number 10. That's pretty darn good. So I was wondering if it's a Phil Knight among those Cal alums that are billionaires.
Yeah, I mean, I if someone steps forward, I'm going to take the phone call, right? I mean, is the reality. So it's not something that I necessarily, under our framework, feel I can go solicit someone to do this. But yeah, if you're aware of any billionaires that want to get involved in this space, I'm going to pick up the phone when they call.
Okay, if there are no more questions, Jay, I can't thank you enough. Almost every meeting that we've had this year, somebody has asked a question about NIL. And so I'm so glad you're here, and glad that you answered the email and joined us tonight, because this is we're got a lot of questions here, and so I hope everybody's gotten their questions answered. And And it's just going to be interesting to see where this heads in the next, few years. I think it's going to be an interesting thing to watch. So, yeah, and I think that your job's going to be real interesting.
Yeah, I would agree. It's a fascinating time to be involved in this industry, and yeah, yep. Well, a lot of changes on the horizon, and thanks again for the invite, Gary, and thanks to all of you for your support of Cal Athletics and this institution, and hope to see you at a game. Let me know if I can ever help you in any way.
Okay, great.
Thank you
Yeah,
for
thanks so
your
much.
Thank you,
candor.
Jay.
Thank you,
Thank
Jay.
you, Jay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Bears.
Go Bears.
Go Bears.
Cheers.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Cheers.
All right, so so remember, keep an eye out on your email for next week's meeting. Hopefully we'll be able to get somebody. Jay, I'll give you I'll reach out to you and see what we can figure out. And then also you can register. The emails have the registration link for Dave Lambros. And as I say, if you've never been here for a Dave Lambros meeting, you want to be here for a Dave Lambros meeting. They're always a whole lot of fun. So with that, I won't see you this weekend at Memorial Stadium, but hope to see you all for the big game. And with that, we'll say good night, and thanks everybody for coming, and go Bears.
Go Bears.
Go Bears. Thanks, Gary.
Go Bears.
Yeah,
Go
thanks.
Bears.
Go Bears. Gotta all say go Bears.